People of color will never truly be free as long as systemic racism continues to plague our world. How many of these forms of discrimination do you endure on a daily basis? Number 1. Microaggressions. Minorities often experience a daily onslaught of microaggressions, perpetuating a culture of disrespect and marginalization. From backhanded compliments to dismissive gestures to outright threats, these acts of bigotry chip away at the dignity and worth of Black lives. It's time to call out and confront these insidious behaviors, fostering a culture of respect and understanding. Let's educate ourselves and others on the harmful impact of microaggressions and strive to create spaces where all individuals feel valued and respected, regardless of race. Number 2. Educational disparities. Witness the glaring disparities in our education system, where Black students are systematically deprived of resources and opportunities. From underfunded schools to biased disciplinary practices, systemic racism relegates Black children to second-class status, perpetuating cycles of poverty and inequality. To combat this injustice, we must demand equitable funding and support for schools serving Black communities. Let's advocate for policies that address the root causes of educational disparities and ensure every child has access to quality education, regardless of race. Number 3. Racial profiling. Brace yourself for the harsh reality of racial profiling, a tool of oppression wielded by law enforcement against Black individuals with impunity. From unwarranted stops to brutal violence, Black people are targeted simply for existing in spaces deemed out of place by a racially biased society. It's time to hold law enforcement accountable for their discriminatory practices and advocate for community policing models that prioritize trust and accountability. Let's support initiatives to end racial profiling and ensure equal protection under the law for all citizens, regardless of race. Number 4. Wealth disparities. Prepare to confront the stark reality of wealth inequality, a byproduct of centuries of systemic racism that continues to enrich the few at the expense of the many. From discriminatory lending practices to unequal access to economic opportunities, Black individuals are systematically denied the chance to build generational wealth. To address this injustice, we must advocate for policies that promote economic justice, such as reparations and wealth redistribution measures. Let's challenge the status quo and work towards a future where wealth is shared equitably among all members of society, regardless of race. Number 5. Healthcare disparities. Brace yourself for the shocking truth about healthcare disparities, where Black lives are devalued and neglected by a system rife with racial bias. From unequal access to healthcare services to disparities in treatment outcomes, systemic racism manifests in every aspect of the healthcare system. To address this injustice, we must demand comprehensive healthcare reforms that prioritize the needs of marginalized communities. Let's support initiatives to expand access to healthcare, address social determinants of health, and promote culturally competent care for all, regardless of race. Number 6. The criminal justice system. Prepare to confront the injustices of the criminal justice system, where Black bodies are warehoused en masse in a modern-day system of racial control. From discriminatory sentencing practices to police violence, systemic racism permeates every stage of the criminal justice process. To dismantle this oppressive system, we must advocate for transformative reforms, such as defunding the police and investing in community-based alternatives to incarceration. Let's demand accountability for police violence, end mass incarceration, and build a criminal justice system that prioritizes rehabilitation and community safety over punishment. Number 7. Redlining and housing discrimination. Prepare to be outraged by the legacy of redlining and housing discrimination, where Black families are systematically denied access to safe and affordable housing. From discriminatory lending practices to segregated neighborhoods, systemic racism robs Black communities of the opportunity to build wealth and thrive. To address this injustice, we must demand policies that promote fair housing practices and address the root causes of residential segregation. Let's advocate for reparative measures, such as housing subsidies and affirmative action policies, to ensure equal access to housing for all, regardless of race. Number 8. Media representation. Brace yourself for the damaging effects of media misrepresentation, where Black lives are reduced to harmful stereotypes and caricatures for the entertainment of white audiences. From criminalizing narratives to whitewashed histories, mainstream media perpetuates a distorted image of Blackness that dehumanizes and marginalizes Black people. To combat this injustice, we must demand diverse and authentic representation in media, both on and off-screen. Let's support Black creators and storytellers, challenge racist tropes, and advocate for media reforms that accurately reflect the richness and diversity of Black experiences. Number 9. Environmental racism. Environmental racism. Prepare to confront the environmental injustices faced by Black communities, where toxic waste sites and polluting industries are disproportionately located in neighborhoods of color. From polluted air and water to environmental health disparities, systemic racism exposes Black people to disproportionate levels of environmental harm. To address this injustice, we must demand environmental justice policies that prioritize the health and well-being of marginalized communities. Let's support grassroots efforts to combat environmental racism, advocate for stricter regulations on polluting industries, and invest in sustainable solutions that benefit all communities, regardless of race. Number 10. Voting rights suppression. Prepare to defend democracy against the onslaught of voter suppression tactics aimed at disenfranchising Black voters and silencing their voices. From restrictive voter ID laws to gerrymandered districts, systemic racism undermines the fundamental right to vote for Black communities. To protect voting rights and combat voter suppression, we must demand comprehensive voting reforms that expand access to the ballot box for all citizens. Let's support initiatives to restore voting rights for formerly incarcerated individuals, expand early voting and mail-in ballot options, and ensure fair and transparent election processes that reflect the will of the people, regardless of race. Have you experienced any of these forms of discrimination firsthand? We want to hear from you. Share your stories and insights in the comments section below.